morning. If everyone could take their seats, we're going to get started here. Well, good morning, and welcome here to the CRLC Supply Chain Evolution event. I'm happy to be here, and I'm Carl Scharf, and I'm a tax advisory shareholder at Schneider Downs in their Transportation Industry Group practice. And I'm honored to be here to represent Schneider Downs as the presenting partner for today's event. Schneider Downs has been a long time sponsor and supporter of the CRLC and the Columbus Chamber itself. And we're happy and proud and thankful that the team here with Saki and the rest of the team at the CRLC host important topics like today and host today's event. So thank you to everyone who's put time and effort in today's meeting. For those that are new to CRLC or attending their first event and not familiar with Schneider Downs, we're a top 60 accounting firm and business advisory firm with offices in the U.S., in Columbus, Pittsburgh, and Washington, D.C. We employ roughly 500 personnel and have 52 partners and shareholders, locally owned and managed, and have attained that growth over a 65-year history, something we're very proud of within the firm. So our Schneider Downs Transportation and Logistics Advisory Group is really made up of accounting, tax, technology, and business management consulting professionals who really combine each of our individual expertise to serve a wide range of transportation accounts. So our transportation clients really cover national carriers to local carriers, large trucking, hauling, freight brokerage, 3PLs, and warehousing and distribution. So we run the gamut. Our industry group really meets together on a regular basis to review and analyze issues facing the industry. So we're well versed on everything you guys are all going through. At Schneider Downs, we really differentiate ourselves through our obsession to client service, a deep bench of professionals, and the breadth of service offerings like state and local tax consulting, restructuring, transaction due diligence, research and development, tax credit studies. Certainly the Inflation Reduction Act is something big. It's going to be around here for the next 10 years, and there's a lot of sustainability and obviously EV credits and incentives in there. So there's going to be a lot more to continue to roll out and trickle out as professionals digest the 1,500 page law. But and also, given today's topic of the evolution of supply chain, I thought it would be a good opportunity to perhaps share a video of one of our groups we're CPAs. There's a lot of CPAs, but we're not just CPAs. We have a team of technology folks as well that combat help with cybersecurity and automation and robotic process automation. So I thought this would be a good chance to share a quick 2-minute video on our automation and data analytics team and how we're kind of helping the transportation industry. So after that, if anyone has any questions, there's a few of us here. I'd be happy to introduce myself and we'd love to meet you. So thank you.
ADAPT is our automation and data analytics process team at Schneider Downs. And from a high level, we do all things data. And we help our customers and clients use data to answer business questions and improve their efficiency and effectiveness of processes. Data analytics creates solutions to help our clients by using their data to help them reach their strategic objectives. And so some people think of data analytics as being overly complex, but it really just comes down to answering a few simple business questions, like what has happened, which would be considered a descriptive analytic, or why did it happen, which would be a diagnostic analytic, or what could happen in the future, which would be considered a predictive analytic, and then finally, what should we do or how should we react, which would be a prescriptive analytic.
And some of our primary services that we typically offer our clients is data analytics consulting, data visualization and dashboarding, report design, data integrations, and data warehousing. These technologies are allowing companies to proactively use their data in ways that they haven't before. So whether they want to monitor company performance, understand their market better, we're providing companies with the ability to do that using data that they have.
data analytics covers all industries. And we liken it to a like auto repair shop, right? So whether you're driving a Beamer or a Benz or a Bentley, if you need new brakes, you need new brakes. There might be nuances between those makes and model, but the overall process and the benefits that you get out of it are one and the same. And that's how we view data analytics. If you need help utilizing your data, we can assist with that regardless of the industry.
Schneider Down's motto, big thinking, personal focus, is really evident in how we handle our engagements. We work collaboratively with our clients to help them design, develop, and deploy their data analytics strategy.
Our team's compiled of professionals with varying backgrounds and different expertise, but above all, we're business consultants. So we like to look at the big picture of how things are impacting your business, and then use that to execute the strategy of data analytics to make our business successful.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Columbus State and welcome to CRLC event. I am Jeremy Banta. I am the committee chair for the CRLC, which gives me the honor of actually sitting on the board of directors at the chamber as well. Thank you for coming to the event today. And as you can see from my picture up there, with my crooked goatee, which you will never not be able to see ever again, that I'm an assistant professor as well at Columbus State. So I'm the program coordinator over the supply chain management program. So I would like to formally welcome you to Columbus State as well. This is, I'm happy to say, the third of 3 events for the CRLC here on campus, and hopefully we'll be able to host more in the future. I could talk for a long time about logistics because that's my job, but I'm not going to. I would like to introduce, however, my chair to give you a little bit more of a formal welcome to Columbus State, Dr. Tom Haviger.
Good morning, folks. Welcome to Columbus State. On behalf of Dr. Dave Harrison, who's president of Columbus State, many of you may know him or have seen him in the news here recently. Dr. Rebecca Butler, who's executive vice president at Columbus State. Got to get the bosses in, right? Dr. Marty Meloweski, who is the vice president for academic affairs, and Dean Carmen Daniels. We are very pleased that you are here on this absolutely picture-perfect day. In Columbus, we don't get very many of these, so hopefully you get outside a little bit at lunchtime. Just listening to some of the conversations, Columbus State's dealing with many of the same issues that you are in recruiting employees and recruiting faculty members and getting students and all the student loan conversations that we're having across this nation. It is a challenge, and Columbus is well positioned, however, to get through this. As we partner with you and you partner with us in order to give you what it is that you need, which is trained technicians out there. Please feel free to call Jeremy, who's doing a great job with the program, or call me directly, and we can do what we can do to help you move forward. I was with the college for 32 years and retired in 2019, and they've asked me to come back and serve in an interim role because we are taking this department and separating it. And so engineering and supply chain will now have a dedicated chairperson, given the necessary changes that we're going to need to make in these academic disciplines to serve your needs. So there'll be some big changes here at the college in the next 6 months or so. It's nice to be back. I retired at a horrible time in the middle of COVID, so I just spent a whole heck of a lot of time in my house, as you did. So it was nice to come back and see some faces again. It is nice to introduce our next speaker, and it really aged me because Jeff was a student of mine in the late 1980s, and he is now, based upon our conversation, been with the college now for 23 years post-graduation, so now I just feel really, really old. But he's doing an amazing job for us in our workforce space. Jeff Spain, who is director of MEP. Thanks for coming.
I have been here a while, so well, good morning. We've already had greetings from Dr. Harrison and the leadership at the college. I also bring with you greetings and thank you from Dr. Lydia Mihaela, Director of the Ohio Department of Development. On behalf of the Ohio Manufacturing Extension Partnership, we want to thank you for your dedication to Central Ohio. I have the privilege of serving as the Managing Director of the Manufacturing Extension Partnership at Columbus State, and I'd like to spend about 3 minutes sharing some details with you about the MEP program. So who is the MEP? We are a key component of our regional manufacturing ecosystem. I love this slide because it really gets at the heart of who we are. The MEP exists to help manufacturers grow, whether in new sales or retained sales, new investment or cost savings. We're here to build. One partner, multiple service solutions, because we're a connector, aligning the right resources at the right time. We have a very straightforward mission to strengthen and empower U.S. manufacturers. It's a unique public-private partnership that delivers comprehensive, proven solutions to U.S. manufacturers, fueling growth and advancing U.S. manufacturing. We're charged with increasing productivity, innovation, profitability, really a mission to empower U.S. manufacturers. We were established about 34 years ago. About 40% of the funding at the MEP at Columbus State comes directly from the U.S. Department of Commerce through NIST, National Institute of Standards and Technology. About 40% comes through Governor DeWine's Office of Department of Development. The rest is public-private. That's the private part of the public-private relationship. Our primary focus is on small to medium-sized manufacturers. So for us small, we look at 1 to 25 employees, medium up to about 800 employees. If we look at the Ohio MEP as a region, we're divided into 6 separate sections. There's a group up in northeastern Ohio, there's a group up in northwestern Ohio, and then we take care of the central area, the 12 counties in the middle. The Manufacturing Extension Partnership is a full-service solutions provider for Central Ohio manufacturers. From consulting and product development to education and talent acquisition, we partner with manufacturers. Fortunately, we've been thought of as a checkbook, so we do show up at companies and write checks to make friends. Not much of a personality, so I show up and go, can I give you money? And that's how I get people to like me. So for things like our internship program, we fund the first 50% of a new employee's wages during their internship period. That's a way we can help out a little bit. Technical training to get people ready, so those interns can bring them along the way. The MEP is able to offer these services, consulting, training, and talent pipelines, through going through a dedicated process that we've mapped out how to work with people. So here's my question to you. How can we help? You know, we're a phone call away, so give us a call to help start the conversation. I really like to use our name and think about us as just an extension of you. We're that additional way to take care of those bottom items on your to-do list, or those top most important items on your to-do list that you're having a hard time getting to. Give us a call and we'll help you along the way with it. And with that, it is my distinct pleasure to introduce you guys all know the team, so I'll bring straight up to the podium to really take us through a great meeting. So again, welcome to Columbus State, and thank you for all you're doing for Central Ohio.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for coming. My name is Saki. I help lead the Columbus Region Logistics Council. I'm really excited about today's event. A little bit of background. This was formerly our retail summit, but the Chamber over the past couple of years has realized that we have more of an offering than just the retail community. So we wanted to bring retailers into a conversation with supply chain professionals, talk about logistics, to talk about the next phase in our region. As we all know, the announcements of Intel, Amgen, Hyperion, etc., has gotten a lot of people excited about what's to come in our region. So as a result, why not have a conversation about supply chain evolution and the next phase? So today we'll have conversations about sustainability, risk management, and the development that's to come in our region with a panel and a couple of really exciting keynote speakers. With that, let me kick things off with our first keynote, who is Brian Filiacho. Brian is the Energy and Sustainability Program Coordinator at MORPC. In this role, Brian leads energy programming and planning for local government members in Central Ohio. He collaborates with local officials and energy and sustainability experts in the region and across the state through MORPC's Energy and Air Quality Working Group and the Rickenbacker Energy Consortium, which I sit on. Both supporting MORPC's regional sustainability agenda, driving energy efficiency, renewable energy, and clean transportation. A more equitable and sustainable economy for all in Central Ohio. So please help me welcome Brian Filiacho. Brian.
Good morning, morning, everyone. As Zaki said, my name is Brian Filiastro. I work in energy and sustainability for Morpstein. Before I get started, I'd like to thank Zaki, CRLC, and Columbus Chamber of Commerce for this opportunity. I know I'm subbing in for the incomparable Jim Schimmer, who unfortunately couldn't be here today. So I'll try to do my best to pick up the slack and start us off and set the stage for a good day of programming. For those who know Jim, he usually starts something like this with a joke. I'm going to spare you that. But I do have a cartoon that hopefully kind of set the stage for what I would like to convey to you. And really, when we talk about supply chain or logistics, we're talking on big picture systems and systems thinking. And one thing that I think we've learned through the pandemic is that no matter how much we believe our industry, our sector, or whatever it might be, are personalized or siloed, that's not really the case. And so with this cartoon, if the boat breaks in half, you don't have two boats, right? And so the idea is with systems thinking and supply chains and logistics is that we're all in the same boat. And this is only going to be amplified even more so with the impacts of climate change. So when thinking about systems, one thing that you've probably seen in the news, and these are just a few pictures of what's been in the news this past year, whether we're talking about flooding from Yellowstone, mega drought that's been happening out west for the last 20 years, where you can't even call it a fire season anymore for how long the actual season is, or poor infrastructure, and flooding down in Jackson, Mississippi, which they still do not have potable water, or neighbors down south of Kentucky with flooding. And the one that kind of epitomizes all the different things that I'm trying to get across here is the bottom left picture of Lake Mead, where you can see what they call it is the bathtub rings. And this just shows the confluence that yes, it's going to impact water levels and water usage out west for crops, drinking water, recreation, what have you. But also, this is from Hoover Dam, and this is the idea of hydroelectric power. And the problem is and this is true across the world, that the levels are getting so low that being able to function as we know it is going to be difficult. And so with that, when we talk about the different things I had in the last slide, we're talking about increase of scorching temperatures. And again, we're not siloed in any one area. There's a domino effect. And so whether there's a 70-plus day heat wave out in China, or the one that's probably more well-known, heat wave out in Europe, it's going to disrupt supply chains. It's going to slow down business, food production, and exacerbate energy use and costs. And so trying to bring that back to the United States and here in Ohio, with extreme heat comes extreme cost. And this was from a study that was published last month. And one thing I want to point out, it might be hard to see, is the legend in the upper right-hand corner where it has 0, 14, 41. And as you get more red, that 41 isn't the number of days of 100 degrees heat for that area. It's actually an increase from what they're already experiencing. So obviously you can see in the south and southeast where that's going to pick up. But also here in central Ohio, here in downtown Columbus, the number of 100 degree days over the next 30 years is going to increase by 10. And from another study, which I'm going to get to on the next slide, where the number of 90-degree heat days could triple in some places in Ohio up to 70 days a year. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because, as we know, this past summer, about 250,000 AAP customers experienced a heat wave. And the problem with these heat waves is that they're not as well known, where we all endure it and we think it's part of life. It's known as kind of the silent killer, because when you talk about hurricanes, tornadoes, floods, and droughts, heat waves actually has a larger impact in terms of public health measures, in terms of death, than all those combined. In fact, there's actually a pilot program internationally. I think the closest city here that's partaking is Milwaukee, where they're actually trying to name these heat waves like they would and categorize them like they would with hurricanes. So I referenced the idea of one study. This is one that came out this July from Cytoanalysis, PCFO, and OEC. And the idea is when we have more extreme heat, extreme storms, there's going to be extreme costs with that. And this is a conservative study, and I say conservative because this takes in the idea that we have done as much as we can do in a mitigation in terms of climate change and the impact of that. And these are the 10 of 50 climate impacts identified in Ohio. And what it shows is that it just increases spending significantly. So now, obviously, this doesn't, that study doesn't pertain to businesses up front, but when you talk about systems, we're all in the same boat. And so this has become more prevalent in businesses and shareholders to urge more action along this idea of what's been more a trend, ESG. And so I'm sure everyone knows who Larry Fink is, CEO, chair of BlackRock, the world's largest asset managing company, which is about $10 trillion. And this quote, so starting back in 2012, he started putting together letters to CEOs in the wake of the financial crisis, providing leadership and trying to set the course of where businesses should start thinking towards. And so with this, we need to be able to change our the type of thinking that we have of status quo and bottom line towards the triple bottom line. So the piggybacking off that last slide's quote, we need to look at different ways that we can incorporate economy, environment, and equity in people, profit, planet in order to have sustainable growth where, as Larry Fink mentions, where profits and purpose don't need to combat one another, but in fact they're inextricably linked. Excuse me, my alarm to drop off my daughter, so then my wife's doing that. Excuse me. And he also goes on to say that those who do ESG well is a signal of operational excellence. And then he goes further in 2020 that climate risk is investment risk and that everyone's going to have to do their part. And so when Larry Fink toots his horn, people start understanding what that refers to. And this is no different than when back in March the SEC put together a climate disclosure proposal to really move things not just to ESG but past ESG, which includes, I know this is kind of confusing, but greenhouse gas emissions. And so the scope one, just to quickly go through, scope one is what you do on site. Scope two is essentially what you purchase, so think of electricity, natural gas. And then scope three would be more of the supply chain, both up and downstream. And in fact, there's actually talk of the scope four in terms of how do you take out carbon regarding the business operations. And so this is we need public-private partnerships, as mentioned earlier, and that's where MORPC, that's what we're really good at. And what we use as our guiding North Star here is the regional sustainability agenda to really foster those public-private partnerships. And so when talking about logistics and supply chain, as Zaki mentioned earlier, I think of the Rickenbacker area where I can't believe this statistic when I saw it, that in the 500 miles that you see in that radius, it's about 45 to almost 47% of the U.S. population is from the Rickenbacker area, and about a third of the Canadian population. And so in 2018, MORPC put together a Rickenbacker area study, which, as you can see on this map, is more than just the airport, in which we looked at workforce mobility, transportation, housing, business retention and attraction, resiliency, and energy. And in 2019, there are a number of recommendations that were put out there, these specific to energy and resiliency, where not to go through all of them, but the idea of the lower hanging fruit of energy conservation measures, EVs, charging stations, cooperative purchasing, PACE financing, other clean energy financing, as well as solar, battery storage, and even microgrids. And all this is kind of done through, as was proposed in 2019, well before I started at MORPC, forming energy consortium to bring together area stakeholders. And so in forming this, actually when I first started back in mid-November, a couple weeks after that, I met Jim, and the first thing he talked about was the idea of Rickenbacker, and how it's there's so much opportunity there, where he did mention his advanced logistics and energy zone paper, that concept paper that he put out there. And so soon after, the idea was we started assembling, talking to the various area partners, Ziki and others. And that would also include some of our local government members, such as the City of Columbus, Columbus Partnership, Smart Columbus, One Columbus, CODA, both Franklin and Pickaway counties, both utilities, AEP and South Central Power, the Airport Authority, and of course the CRLC. And the idea was to start building a roadmap towards bringing some of these clean energy solutions to life and to action. And through this, we started meeting in March, and we've had 3, and each of those shows kind of the key presentations we've had, with the 4th coming later this month, where we've been looking at different ways that CODA is investing, putting together their Rickenbacker Area Mobility Center with LEED Platinum aspirations, Buckeye Power, which is, they're in charge of all the generation for rural co-ops in the state, and that is through South Central Power in that region. Their approach to grid resiliency and bringing energy generation online. Hopefully I'll get these acronyms right. Ohio Air Quality Development Authority and the Columbus Franklin County Finance Authority, trying to provide information regarding how they can help spur investment and foster that public-private partnership. And then later this month, we'll have the Airport Authority providing their plans and accomplishments along and best practices regarding energy. Now with this, I mentioned a lot of those that we've had involved, and we do have a couple of developers. However, we do need more private sector involvement. As mentioned, this is going to be difficult, not easy. We need collaboration, and this is something that we're looking forward to really fostering that partnership. And in order to know where the public sector can help out, we need more private sector involvement to provide that information and create a dialogue. And as one of the earlier speakers mentioned, and after all the things mentioned here, that there are sustainable businesses coming to the region, obviously Intel being the biggest splash, and with that their supply chain spin-offs that will be coming to the region, and also most notably the idea of federal legislation. And this is key because we do have the bipartisan infrastructure law, which is already doling out money, where we do have the Ohio Department of Transportation is still awaiting approval from their NEVI, which is their National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Plan, statewide, that will spur charging stations across the state to hopefully decrease range anxiety and increase EV adoption. Other part is chips, as we mentioned. We'll see the president here tomorrow. But the other part of that is not always mentioned is the science part of that act, where, as mentioned, regarding building up the workforce, making those connections to Columbus State, to OSU, to really foster the next generation of the workforce. And then most notably, that's going to really drive innovation and transitioning towards a clean energy economy is the Inflation Reduction Act. As mentioned earlier, where there's going to be $369 billion worth of dollars that are going to be funneled to all states, and that's something that we need to really jump on and be looking towards forward. And so I leave you with this quote, where from Larry Fink's most recent letter to CEOs, and really that call that it's going to take a lot of collaboration. It's happening now, and when I say it, I'm referring to the clean energy economy. And it's one of those things where where will you be? Will you lead, or will you be led? And so with that, I thank you very much for your time, and please, whether it's Rickenbacker or otherwise, if you're interested in talking about that public-private partnership, please don't be afraid to reach out to me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brian. Okay, up next, we have a esteemed panel to discuss risk management, digital risk management in particular. This conversation comes from a lot of our organizations and members in this space are automating and getting excited about automation, but there may be a blind spot. There may be areas of your organization that you're excited about, but let's make sure we pay attention to the risk. So with that, I will introduce our three panelists. We have AJ Orr of Simple Plan IT, Chad Mowry of Porter Wright, and Sean Thomas of Schneider Downs. Gentlemen.
Good morning, everybody. As Zaki said, my name is AJ Orr. I'm the founder and CEO of Simple Plan IT, which is a digital risk management firm specializing in helping businesses manage their digital risk in real time. And with that, I also want to give my two esteemed guests here the chance to introduce themselves and what they do.
Yep, thanks, AJ. I'm Sean Thomas. I'm a senior manager at Schneider Downs in our IT risk advisory and cybersecurity practice. So I kind of straddle the line between our traditional IT consulting services around risk and compliance, and our cybersecurity services around penetration testing and incident response.
And I'm Chad Mowry. I'm a partner at Porter Wright, where I focus a lot of my practice on cybersecurity, both incident response when an incident happens, as well as doing a lot of preparation work ahead of time, so if an incident happens, you're ready to handle it in the correct and least painful way. I can't say not painful, I guess least painful is the best word to use.
It's all about minimizing the damage, minimizing impact. So as everybody's been talking about, and as Zaki mentioned before we came up here, businesses are incorporating more technology every day, whether it's automation, smart devices, robotics, and technology is allowing us to do more with less and giving businesses a chance to increase efficiencies and things of that nature and increase their bottom line. But with that, as we all can agree, there's inherent risk that's assumed with that, especially when it comes to the risk in cyber attacks. And so over the past couple of years, how have you guys seen the changes when it comes to cyber attacks and vulnerabilities and the increase or overall increase of that over the past couple of years?
Yeah, I think one of the big changes that I've seen is that cyber attacks have gone from an idea of we're going to steal your data to now we're going to cripple your operations. And I think that's really critical to this audience here. Looking at, when I was talking to Zaki before this session, looking at like the Expeditors breach, it's a $16.5 billion organization. You do the math, downtime on that is about $30,000 a minute that they're down. And they were down for about 3 weeks, so that's almost $1 billion of lost revenue. And not to mention the customers that went elsewhere during that outage.
I think really the change really happened during the pandemic when everybody went remote, right? All of a sudden you had a lot of people working remotely. And I think a lot of the assumptions that we built into cybersecurity plans were blown because nobody ever, we were helping companies work on cybersecurity plans in 2018 and 2019. We never thought about everybody sitting at their kitchen table with their own laptop or iPad doing their job. And I think really adapting to that environment and making sure that we're covering that, where your security is not only dependent on what you as a company do, but what you as an individual do. I went on vacation, so I went to stayed in a condo, but they said, "Oh, we've got secure Wi-Fi." I said, "Great, what's the password?" And they said 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I know people think I stole that joke from Spaceballs. I did not. It actually was the password. But if you've got enough employees working on vacation on those kinds of unsecure systems, it'll cause you an issue no matter how good your inside corporate security is.
And I think both of you guys bring up a good point, especially with the example of the most recent breach. We hear in the news all the time about the big companies being impacted by this. Those are the ones that make the news. But as you guys will surely attest, cyber criminals are equal opportunists. They have no biases, and anybody is welcome to be a victim of them. And so, with that being said, what do you guys say, or how do you guys handle business leaders who say, you know, we don't have to worry about cybersecurity because we're too small to be a target, or we don't have anything worth stealing? Because I think those are two of the common things that I hear is that, AJ, we're too small to be a target. I'm like, are you really though?
I mean, the motto of our team is that it's not a question of if, it's a question of when. And it doesn't necessarily have to be the big breaches. It can be something as simple as a man-in-the-middle attack where they steal, you know, information in order to reroute a payment transaction. It could be something like just a small business email compromise where they phish your employees and start, you know, getting data that way. Or just, you know, a smaller ransomware attack where they don't look to cripple your operation, but just, you know, encode certain big key information to get a smaller payment. And for people that say that we're not big enough, I've had 2 cases in the last 3 years involving churches, where they've actually stolen money from churches and man-in-the-middle attacks from churches. One church was doing a renovation, and they went in and did a man-in-the-middle attack and stole money from the church that they had collected to do a renovation. So if they're willing to hit churches, I'm not sure, you know, who they wouldn't be able to hit at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing to remember is that cyber criminals are really no different than any other thieves. I mean, there are folks trying to commit the diamond heist at the jewelry store, but there's also a lot of folks that are just checking for unlocked doors. It doesn't matter; they're equal opportunity. If you have an unlocked door, they're gonna break in. They're gonna figure out how they can leverage that to you know, extort you for money. So I think that's the thing that you have to keep in mind, regardless of what size of organization you are. Just thinking about how secure are you, because once they're in, they're gonna find some way to get something out of you.
And I think one of the other things that I know that I've had to deal with, or at least work with clients through, is with more and more organizations moving into the cloud because of its efficiencies and the things in which it brings to organizations, which I'm a big proponent of moving things to the cloud. But I also feel like sometimes moving things to the cloud gives people a false sense of security because they believe that, oh, well, I'm with Microsoft or I'm with Google or whatever the other provider is, that these bigger organizations, they're going to do their best to protect my data. And, you know, what do you guys feel about those sentiments when it comes to a lax sense of cybersecurity because my information's in the cloud, so therefore it's protected because that provider is doing their due diligence and doing their best to protect my information at all costs?
Yeah, I think it definitely introduces a new set of challenges from a you know, testing and confirmation perspective. It's difficult to do penetration testing over a cloud service. Typically, that's not allowed. But you look at the cloud service providers. I mean, Amazon's had major issues. Microsoft's had issues. G Suite had an issue with their email security a couple years ago. So you know, the major providers still have the same problems as everybody else, and really, you have to be monitoring them just like any other service provider you have to make sure that they're maintaining the standards that they're selling you on.
If you think they're looking out for you, don't read the contracts. You'll be in for a shock. But I would say is, we always really tell people that your weakest part of your security program is usually the user sitting in the chair, right? I mean, social engineering is probably the greatest threat on cybersecurity. People finding emails and clicking on clicking on links or things like that, and they're getting better and better. I've recently had a matter where, not only did they know the person to go to in order to try to steal a payment from, but they actually knew they had actually read the emails long enough between them and the actual vendor to know how much money was exactly owed, which invoice numbers. They actually provided invoice numbers and said, oh, here's the actual invoice numbers, but send them to this account, not that, and took the money and stole it. No security that Amazon or Microsoft is going to prevent you from that. So it's really working with the individual, working with the employees, and kind of having them ready to identify those kinds of issues.
And I think one more thing that I'll add on to that is that while these providers will do their best to try to protect the data at rest when it's in their environment, if your credentials get compromised, there's no protection against that. So if a criminal is actually able to compromise your credentials and then use those to get into the system, that's not the provider's fault. That falls on you as the individual and you as the company. So to your point, Chad, making sure that your employees are educated and aware of what to avoid so that they're not a victim of that type of attack. Now, as we look to move forward on things, when it comes to the way the speed at which cybersecurity attacks have changed and evolved over time, do you guys feel like I want to say the security basics of just having a firewall and antivirus in place, is that efficient enough, or is that enough to keep businesses secure in this ever-evolving and changing environment?
I mean, it used to be, when I give a presentation, it's a great slide, but it used to be that, you know, what I used to call the castle wall theory of security. We're going to put up a firewall, we're going to put an antivirus, all our stuff's going to be in there, and all this stuff's out there. And all, you know, the bad actors are out there. And really, you're looking at multi-levels of defense, I think, in order to help that. You can't just rely on a single level of defense. But again, I think the most important thing is having your employees trained correctly and ready and prepared. And having them able to identify things. And even that's become a little harder, I think. You know, I used to give this training back in like 2017, 2018, we used to talk about things like, you know, looking for emails that are out of the ordinary during weird times, like getting an email at 8 o'clock at night or 9 o'clock at night. But, you know, through the pandemic and flex hours and ways people's work schedules happen, there are a lot of people that are sending work emails at 8 o'clock and 9 o'clock at night from vendors and things like that. So I think we've really got to evolve with the times as well and really kind of, you know, find other ways to work with and train employees to spot these issues.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the principles are still the same, really. I think it's just you need to adapt your tool set that you have to, you know, the changing work environment. You know, as Chad mentioned, a lot of folks working remotely from questionable networks. You know, making sure that you have the next generation antivirus that's going to follow that endpoint around and make sure that you have the same controls as you would if you were in your traditional corporate network. So I think it's really just, you know, updating the principles to the times.
I agree with that. As we talk about cybersecurity, when people hear the term cybersecurity, typically think of something IT related because it's where it typically originates from. But in all actuality, you know, as a business leader, it's really reframing the position or the idea of cybersecurity and looking at it more along the lines of digital risk management. Because criminals aren't after your digital assets, they're not after your computer networks or devices, they're after your digital assets, your financial. Understanding that, where do you think that businesses or business leaders should be shifting their focus to better prepare themselves for cyber defenses moving forward, you know, protecting these digital assets or minimizing or mitigating this digital risk that they now find themselves in as they increase their digital resources?
Yeah, I think an area that I'm still surprised a lot of folks haven't undertaken is some sort of data management process internally and really understanding what information you have there, because you really can't manage what you can't measure. And if you don't know what data you have and where it exists, it's really hard to secure it and make sure that the controls you need in place are in the appropriate places. So that is really an area that I think is still kind of a fledgling area for a lot of organizations that I think that, you know, taking that first step and understanding what data you have and how it needs to be secured, that really drives your investments across the spectrum as far as cybersecurity goes.
And I think another thing is really, it goes, I think, to the heart of your question, Jay, is really separating the idea that IT and cybersecurity are not the same things. I am related to a number of IT specialists, and they will tell you that their job is to implement the systems that help the company the best and keep them running with as little downtime as possible. And that's what their job is. And sometimes when you get hit with a cybersecurity incident, that's not the goals that you should be looking at. You know, trying to get that system back up and running as quickly as possible is not always the best thing. You know, we've seen times when, you know, doing that has actually harmed evidence that has allowed us to maybe make a claim with our insurance company or something like that. On the flip side, we've seen people set things up so quickly that they missed, you know, signs that they had a bigger problem. We had one, about 2 years ago, where they said, oh, it's just one compromised email account, no problem, we'll go ahead and fix it, don't worry, we don't need the cybersecurity people to come in. And then about 2 months later, they got hit with a ransomware attack that basically took out their systems, because what they didn't realize was it wasn't just that email account, there was a whole web shell sitting on top of the Exchange server that nobody saw. And, you know, there was a bigger problem there. So I think really differentiating between what's an IT issue and what's a cybersecurity issue is really the dividing line that a lot of companies need to address.
And Chad, you make a very good point there in that what's an IT issue and what's a cybersecurity issue. And so I want to pose that question to you guys. Do businesses need to start looking at investing in or bringing in cybersecurity specialists versus just an IT person that's designed or is responsible for maintaining the systems and keeping them up and running?
I think at a minimum, you've got to have a provider that's going to do that for you, either on the planning phase to do penetration testing, maybe phishing testing with your employees and employee training, or at least having somebody to call when a cybersecurity incident happens. Nothing is worse than, when I get called in to help, manage an incident, and they say, hey, who should we call, to do the cybersecurity? We don't know anybody in the area to do the forensic investigation or the remediation. Because already that person should have already been called and should have already been doing their work. And so we're kind of a couple steps behind. So I think even if you don't have the resources to bring somebody internally, having those connections, having those contacts, and planning ahead of time and saying, hey, if we get hit, this is the company that we're going to call to bring in to help us do that remediation is very important.
Yeah, I think to add to that, looking at a lot of organizations, this is an area that I think that you still see a lot of organizations structuring security under IT, and I think they really are competing priorities. It's difficult for somebody to really represent security when the priority is IT operations. So I think breaking those out into two separate business units is definitely the way that things need to move in the future for most organizations. Understanding a lot of smaller organizations can't afford to do that. I think, as Chad mentioned, looking at external resources who can augment that IT team and really give an opinion of what is best from a security perspective and not just an operational perspective is really critical to making sure that you have the full picture when you're making decisions from a business perspective.
Now, both of you guys have mentioned employee training and making sure that the employees understand what risks and vulnerabilities exist out there so they can better protect themselves. I've always used the terminology that your employees are your last line of defense, and it's best to create a human firewall, and the way that you do that is through education. Now, with that said, there's a lot of varying degrees of education, and so what are your guys' thoughts as far as how frequently and how often should they be training their employees? I mean, it used to be doing the annual, lunch and learn, an hour or two sitting at a table, and an IT professional like myself just spewing information that just glazes people over. Are those things effective nowadays?
Yeah, I think that the answer is that training should be continuous. So the way that I look at it is, your control should be designed such that it makes it easy for people to do the right thing. If it's easy for them to do it, they're going to do it every day. They're going to learn those behaviors, and they're not going to, if it's easy for them to report a potential phishing email, they're going to report it. They're not just going to, they're going to think about it that way. So, I think that's the answer I would give. I think that the better you can structure your controls to incorporate those principles and make that training ongoing, and correcting people as they go versus just doing that, check the box one time a year, they get on and do some video training, or you bring somebody and kind of spew information at them. That's not really very effective. I think it's just that, continuous touch points with them. If you see people that are going outside of the accepted behaviors, making sure they're corrected either through an automated control or, it's getting directed back to somebody who can say, hey, why did you click on this? This wasn't really, a good thing to do for the business.
First of all, I really like that human firewall idea, so if that's untrademarked, I'm stealing that for my next presentation. But I kind of agree. I think we've all seen those videos and your eyes kind of glaze over and you kind of watch them, but you're really not listening. I think the most important thing you can do is actually do testing. Actually have, either internally if you have the capabilities or an outside company come in and send phishing emails to your employees. Test so many ever so often, see who clicks, see who doesn't click, and create lessons learned that way. I think people learn a lot that way, and then they pay attention more than anything else. Because if you actually have an incident and that person's like, okay, I did something wrong here, but it didn't cost me anything, but I better pay attention going forward, that's going to do a lot better for you than if they watch a video every month, every quarter, every year, whatever it is.
Now, I know that both of you guys deal with organizations that are in regulated industries, and so for those that are not in regulated industries, I want to tap on something that I think is important. I want to get your guys' opinion on it. Is how valuable is it to have good documented policies, procedures in place when it comes to a different side or a non-technical side when it comes to protecting your digital assets and cybersecurity?
I think it's imperative to have a plan in place. It's football season, right? So, you wouldn't send your team out there to play a game without a playbook. And I think it's the same way here. I've literally walked into meetings, called into on an incident, and we've had one person trying to read the insurance policy, seeing the covered, another person trying to figure out what to tell the IT help desk to tell people because their systems are down, and a third person, trying to figure out where the data map is because they can't figure out where the system, what systems could be affected. What's not happening in that scenario? Nobody's actually addressing the incident itself and trying to remediate it. And part of that was because those things weren't laid out ahead of time. They didn't have that playbook ahead of time. And so, we really tell companies, you've got, because we have that motto, it's not if, it's when. You've got to have that playbook. So when it happens, a lot of these things are mapped out, a lot of these things are taken care of ahead of time, and you can really focus on addressing the incident, not handling all these issues that could have been handled prior.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't really have a whole lot to add to that. I don't want to overstep my legal expertise here. I don't know, Chad, has anybody actually, have they actually done anything with that new Ohio regulation a couple years ago where there was an affirmative defense capability for folks that had a documented security program? Are you aware of any cases that would actually put that to trial or anything?
I have not seen anything go to trial. I know a lot of clients that created a reason, or for them to go out and put a cybersecurity incident plan together. The one thing I would say is that in Ohio right now, you don't have, if you have a data breach, the cost other than the attorney's fees of the class action counsel, the actual people in the class that have their data breach don't actually recover a lot. So there's not a big cost there. But I will tell you, there are laws and bills, or I should say bills, not laws, circulating around the State House right now that would actually give individuals rights and a statutory cause of damages if their data is breached. So you go from, we'll give you a free coupon for $5 from my client because your data was breached to, you might have 100 people a person have a statutory damages. And when you get up to 100,000, 200,000 people being breached, that $100 a person becomes real money real quick.
And I think it's those things, it's those unforeseen costs is why so many businesses struggle after a data breach. I think I saw a statistic, and I don't know how much it's changed over the year, but it's like 60% of small businesses that suffer a cyber attack file for bankruptcy within the first or 6 months after that. And so it's those unknown costs or unforeseen costs that actually factor into that. As we get close or looking at wrapping up time on this, on our discussion, for those that are in the audience now that have, this has sparked an interest and said, okay, I should probably be taking cybersecurity a little bit more seriously. Where do you suggest that they start? Like, where do we begin on this thing? Because it's a big animal to try to tackle, especially depending on the size of your organization. It can be a lot to handle, try to wrap your arms around. And there's a lot of information out there, some good, some bad. And so where should somebody start? How should they begin this process when it comes to cybersecurity and protecting their business?
Yeah, so, if you don't have the resources internally to start that exercise, definitely find a provider who can help guide you through that process. I always encourage clients, if they're just starting down that road, to find a framework that's going to work for them, and then do a gap analysis and really put together a strategic roadmap, because it's so difficult to put together a really comprehensive security program. It's not going to happen overnight, so you really have to prioritize your investments. Typically, there's only a limited budget, and making sure that you're really shoring up the weakest links first, and then working through your program and maturing it over time. So that's the approach I would take if I was looking at it just from ground zero, if you don't have anything in place currently.
I think that it really starts with a conversation. I think you've got to really bring the stakeholders together. You've got to bring in IT. You've got to bring in the various organizations that would have a stake in cybersecurity. You've got to bring in legal. Nobody likes talking to the lawyers. I get that.
And know where all your data exists. There have been plenty of times where we'll go in and we'll do an audit, and there'll be retired machines that weren't properly disposed of, and there's sensitive data sitting on those machines on a shelf that they were just going to throw out. And so it's the little things that lead to data breaches. It's not always a criminal on the other side hacking away trying to penetrate your network. It's the little things that lead to big breaches and things of that nature. And so with that said, I would like to thank you guys both for joining me on this and for sharing. And if anybody has any questions, Feel free to reach out to any of us up here. We'll be more than happy to help and answer questions any further.
Thank you, gentlemen. Okay, up next, we're going to have a conversation about why Columbus. I know we all know, theoretically, hypothetically, we know the statistics around how you can get to 50% of the population. But we're going to hear from HICMA about why Columbus, why they chose Columbus, and touch a little bit on the national security risks that are incorporated with HICMA choosing Columbus. So up next, we have an interview with Hanad Douale and Michael Balog. Dr. Hanad Douale is the founder of Just Deeds and Care Intellects. Dr. Douale is a healthcare professional with over 15 years of experience in the healthcare industry, from education, research, clinical, and digital health technology. He is a seasoned technology entrepreneur and business owner. And I will be interviewing Michael Balog, who is currently Senior Vice President, General Manager of the large pharmaceutical production facility on the west side of Columbus, HICMA. For some that might be aware, this is a former Roxanne Labs Boring Engelheim site, currently producing 6 billion doses a year for the U.S. market, perhaps the largest remaining generics production facility in the United States. Dr. Douale, Michael.
Yes, can you hear me? Good morning to you all. I have the pleasure of having Michael from HICMA. I love Columbus. I'm a transplant, originally from England, Bristol. I love Columbus. I've been here at Columbus since 2010. It continues to hold me. It's a beautiful city, amazing companies, and one of those amazing companies is HICMA. However, HICMA may not have the name recognition in some of the larger organizations. So I'm going to start with that, Michael. Tell us the origin story of HICMA and why Columbus.
Okay, so HICMA Pharmaceuticals is kind of an under-the-radar top 10 generic pharmaceuticals. And I emphasize generics because it's not Pfizer, Moderna, AstraZeneca, a lot of the pharmaceutical names that people are familiar with. So the story started over 40 years ago, founded in Jordan. It was the first Middle Eastern pharmaceutical company to get approved by the FDA. And they made a strategic decision to invest in Columbus, about $2 billion investment at this Boehringer Ingelheim site in 2016. About 2/3 of our sales and our production is for the US, even though we produce for greater than 80 countries worldwide for ourselves and other contract manufacturers. Columbus was strategically chosen for a couple reasons, obviously besides the facility itself. You actually get a pretty significant value discount on top-notch quality employees in Columbus. We look at the cost of living data for Columbus, it's about 86%, 100 being the national average. A lot of the pharmaceutical industry is in the New Jersey, Philadelphia corridor where it's about 120. So you get top talent for about a 30% discount, which was a decision. And I know Brian touched on it earlier, distribution. We also decided to set up shop for our distribution center in Columbus because the one-day drive within 45% of the population, two-day drive within 80% of the population, we actually have a lot of penalties in our business if we don't deliver on time. So having a centralized location in Columbus was very, very important to us.
Fantastic. Is there a meaning in the name HICMA? Curious.
HICMA, it's an Arabic origin. It actually means wisdom.
Wow.
Is what it
Right.
means.
I mean, it's the first time. I never knew the origin actually began in the Middle East. Fantastic. Generics. When it comes to drug generics, where is your industry right now? What challenges and opportunities do you see? And how is it evolving?
Okay, not trying to be an alarmist, but there's some stats that I always share with people on prescriptions and generics. Most people are not aware that 92% of the prescriptions filled in the US are generics. Scary part of that is only 16% of the revenue of that 92% goes to generics. So the 8%, the Pfizer, Moderna, et cetera, generates 84% of the revenue. So you do a very heavy lift in the generics industry for a pittance, if you will, of the revenue to be generated. what that's driving, and it's great. If you go back to the Hatch-Waxman Act, if you guys are familiar with that, 1984, that blazed the trail for generics, it works. You know, during the 40 years in which that act set up the process for generics, the typical generics, once it's been on the market 5 years, it's 5% of the cost of what the branded product was. So it's working, but the cost has become so low that it's driving a massive offshoring of production in the pharmaceutical industry. Another stat that I share with people, in 2015, these are recent numbers, 2/3 of the generics were produced in the US. 2020, just 5 years later, only 1/3 are produced in the US. And there is this massive offshoring that's become a national security issue that was really exposed during COVID. So I really appreciate people that pride themselves in the Made in USA, Made in Columbus. For my industry, I'd love to not let that get away from us and continue this massive shift overseas. It's very important to our national security.
Michael, I'm glad you touched upon offshoring. Naturally, offshoring doesn't affect only the pharmaceutical industry, but so many other industries. With that being said, what's your secret sauce? How are you staying competitive to those offshore companies and pharmaceuticals coming?
For us, you know, our secret to success, we have a lot of diverse technologies in these 6 billion doses that we produce. The one area that we've really had good success on are combination products. So combination products are where you have a medical device and a drug product. We're the leading producer of like generic Flonase, generic Advair. Our most notorious launch of a product last year, you guys are probably familiar with Narcan, opioid crisis, very, very prevalent in Ohio in the United States. 106,000 people have died in the last 12 months for opioid overdose. In Franklin County specifically, you have 3 people a day that die from opioid overdose. Anyway, so we got approval of a sort of a 2x strength of Narcan. Narcan made by another company, Emergent. Our product is called Clexado. So instead of 4 milligrams, ours is 8 milligrams, which is very important in the arsenal of fighting this crisis, because with the prevalence of fentanyl and other synthetic opioids, it takes a bigger hammer. You have a lot of instances where people are incapacitated and a single dose of Narcan is not adequate. So the 8 milligram and many times can save a life where a Narcan might. So that's a branded product for us because we realize it's getting tougher to survive just on the generics. But those are some of the combination products. When you get into the white tablet production, you know, your metformins, your lisinopril, et cetera, to be honest, we're not that competitive. A lot of that is part of the 2/3 that's made overseas. We just, you know, we can't effectively compete in that regard.
We have in place. One of those weaknesses is our critical need to have domestic chip manufacturing. And hence, with President Biden and the current administration, the passing of the CHIP Act. Having said that, do we need a Pharma Act to encourage, to support domestic production of pharmaceuticals?
Yeah, I would love to have an equivalent version of that. In the midst of COVID last year, the White House issued a memo basically saying that in the security of in interest of national security, there were 4 areas that they wanted to focus on. You have vaccines, cybersecurity that we talked about, pharmaceuticals, and there's another one. Anyway, all of the other ones have been dealt with. The vaccines, the cybersecurity. One of them's losing me. But there hasn't been anything significant done on the pharmaceutical side. There's been the CHIPS Act, for example. That's a $280 billion government program. 52 billion of that, designed to be grants, incentives for companies to set up shop and produce in the United States. The biggest deal to date on the pharmaceutical side was an $800 million investment, an organization called Flow. They still have yet to produce a single dose of pharmaceutical product. What we're kind of clamoring for is do something with the existing facilities before they get away from us. The largest production facility in the United States, you guys, this is big in the news, Mylan Pharmaceuticals, Morgantown, West Virginia. That was the biggest pharmaceutical production facility in the U.S. Shut its doors July 1st. There's another large facility in Wilson, North Carolina, that just announced this last month that they're shutting down. These big facilities are going away. There has to be something to not only invest in the future, but to try to to support the existing infrastructure before it gets away.
Just to dovetail into that, what would you say is the incentives? Do you have specific, we've got incentives in mind to be able to drive and really build this industry?
I think the biggest incentive would be a lot of your essential medicines, your diabetic, your blood pressure, your cholesterol medicines. Find a way to give front of the line relative to production in the U.S. and not just seek out, the penny per tablet options offshoring. The subsidy or whatever you call it would be minimal, but to keep that production, there's a bit of numbers here. There's about 200 billion generic doses that are produced in the U.S. The mega plant that I talk about here in Columbus, we only do about 6 billion doses. So you have a lot that has to be produced. So you have to find a way to subsidize that in the U.S. to support the production before it all goes to India.
Fantastic. It will not be an interview without touching upon workforce. Naturally, there are great companies also coming to Columbus and the greater Columbus area. How are you competing for workforce talent?
It's an interesting challenge. I know we talked about Intel earlier, but Amgen is kind of the one that's at our doorstep. And Amgen has actually had some success on recruiting our talent. I'd like to think we do a great job on our internal training programs. Sometimes we can't compete. They're one of the branded companies. This 8% of the market that generates a lot of the revenue. Their offers, it's great for the community. We have to sometimes let our employees go to Amgen, but find other secondary suppliers that we can take those employees for, because our opportunity is great in itself, even if it isn't necessarily on par with Amgen at times. But we have to find other ways to be attractive and competitive to keep our production going.
I appreciate that. By the way, that wasn't part of the question set, so I'm glad you took care of that. Just wrapping up, my last question is really is more of a message from you. What message do you want to leave with the audience? And perhaps in the audience we may have some budding elected officials. So coming back to your request and support, what would be that message to the audience?
I think it's part of what I said earlier, this seismic shift of stuff going offshore under the radar that people are not aware of. And I think something needs to happen sooner than later before the US-based manufacturing gets away from us. So to start to formulate a CHIPS equivalent plan that's going to protect US-based pharmaceutical manufacturing, I think is very important.
Fantastic. Well, all of you have heard Michael's request and ask. Again, please give a hand to Michael for joining me, and thank you again, Michael, for participating.
To close us out today, we have Andy Weeks, Executive Vice President of Van Trust. Andy Weeks' primary responsibility involve identification, investigation, and management of new development opportunities in Columbus and the surrounding region. Andy has over 25 years of commercial real estate experience in a wide variety of product types, including office, mixed use, multifamily, industrial, and senior housing. He has completed several projects with an aggregate value of approximately $1 billion in 7 different markets across the country. He's going to join us today to talk about some of the exciting development we have in our region. Andy?
Good morning, everybody. Thanks, Aki. I'm well aware I'm the final speaker for today, so I've tailored my remarks accordingly. A little bit about Van Trust. So we are a national real estate development company. We're headquartered in Kansas City. We have offices in Phoenix, Dallas, Jacksonville, and Columbus. I head up the Columbus office. As Aki mentioned in the intro, we do all kinds of real estate, office, mixed use, multifamily. But most of what we've been doing over the past 5 or so years is industrial. And when we say industrial, when developers or real estate brokers talk about industrial, we're really talking about warehouse distribution centers. We're not really building manufacturing facilities for anybody. So what I'm going to talk about here today is I'm going to talk about some of the national trends that we're seeing among our tenants. Again, we lease all of our buildings to tenants. We get a lot of feedback from them and see what they're looking for and thinking. Touch on some regional trends that we're seeing, and then finish with Central Ohio, what's happening in this market, And then finally, I have a 2-minute video highlighting the Intel supplier park that we're developing in New Albany. National trends, so it's interesting, really over the past 50 or 60 years, the demand for industrial space tracks very, very closely to US GDP growth, which makes sense, right? If companies are doing well and the economies are expanding, they're looking to lease more space. If there's a recession, they're looking to shed that space. Really, that has not, in the last 8 years, that relationship has kind of broken off a little bit. The demand for industrial space has really outstripped US GDP growth. And if you think about it, the main driver for that is online retail sales, right? Companies are continuing to invest in their supply chain, even as maybe they're not building as many retail stores. And then that completely got upended during the COVID pandemic, the early days of the pandemic, when everybody was shopping from home for everything, GDP crashed, and demand for industrial space just completely soared. And we're still trying to catch up to that demand. And while we're getting there in terms of catching up, I think the outperformance of industrial space compared to the US GDP will continue to surpass or do better than US GDP growth for a variety of factors that we're seeing. One is the shift from just-in-time inventory to just-in-case inventory. And again, everybody's heard about the supply chain challenges, whether it's a new refrigerator that you're trying to order or products that your company is trying to move. Companies want to try to hold more inventory to avoid the situations that they ran into during the pandemic. Online sales are continuing to grow as a percentage of overall retail sales. That's obviously slipped in the last couple of quarters as people start going to bricks and mortar retail again, but still online sales as a percentage of retail sales today is still higher than it was in 2019, and we think that will again continue to grow, which again requires companies to invest in their supply chain. They also have to obviously figure out how they're going to handle online returns or reverse logistics. So again, that just really drives warehouse demand. One of the earlier speakers touched on automation for advanced manufacturing. We're also seeing automation become a bigger deal in these new warehouse distribution centers. We just finished a large distribution center for Amazon in New Albany, and the automation that's going in these new buildings, the more sophisticated companies, it's really incredible. Driven by the difficulty in finding labor and a whole lot of other reasons, automation is continuing. And if you're a company and you're investing in a multi-million-dollar automation system, you're not going to put it in an old building. You can't even find a building that can accommodate that. They want the new buildings that offer all the amenities and can really handle that level of automation. So again, another factor driving our business. Onshoring and reshoring, we've all heard about it for many years, about companies starting to relocate manufacturing operations in the United States. This time it's real. It's not driven by political posturing or tariff wars. Again, driven by the pandemic, companies do not want their entire sourcing strategy to be focused in China or Asia. So they're transitioning to a China +1 sourcing strategy. Again, I think they just made news about a new Honda EV plant that's going to be in Ohio somewhere. Again, that's an example. Intel, of course, is an example. So that trend is certainly continuing, and I think it's sustainable. Actually, I mean, the whole globalization trend is beginning to reverse in many ways. Migration patterns in the U.S., again, no surprise. People are leaving northeast part of the United States, leaving California. The populations in those areas are shrinking. People are moving to a variety of other places, and again, companies are not blind to that fact. They want their supply chain to be serving their customers. And as their customers move to different parts of the United States, they will be moving their distribution locations to other parts of the United States. So that's why we think that the industrial market will continue to do very, very well. The industrial real estate market will continue to do very well. Another interesting trend that we're seeing, again, a year ago or so, everybody heard about the blockages in the U.S. ports. We all saw photos of what was happening in LA Long Beach. The cost for ocean shipping actually have really started declining over the last few quarters. But domestic costs are really rising, right? Labor costs, obviously, facility costs, all that stuff is going up really dramatically and kind of erasing that benefit in ocean shipping costs. So the whole logistics business, and I think this is probably good news for a lot of people in this room, the logistics business has gotten a lot more complicated since the pandemic, and that's causing more and more companies to outsource their logistics to third-party logistics providers, 3PLs. We're seeing 3PLs are leasing a larger percentage of our warehouse space than they were before the pandemic. So I think that's kind of an interesting trend to see. And then of course, inflation, we all know inflation, I don't need to belabor that. Lease rates, construction costs, they're all going up 15, 20% a year. And hopefully costs moderate. I certainly don't see them reversing. From a regional standpoint, I forgot to mention this in my introduction, I believe, but in Columbus we've done, I think, 15 industrial buildings over the past 5 or 6 years. Our office in Columbus has developed, I think, 15 warehouse buildings outside of Central Ohio, and we focus on Cincinnati, Louisville, and Indianapolis. So we have buildings under construction in all those markets as well, in addition to Columbus. The short answer is those markets are all also doing very well, and I'll touch on Columbus in a bit. The reason we focus on those markets as opposed to Pittsburgh, Detroit, Cleveland, those markets are not big box warehouse markets. I mean, people are not developing 1 million square foot warehouses in Pittsburgh, Cleveland, or Detroit, and there's a whole bunch of reasons why. But we really stay involved in other strong logistics markets like the 3 I mentioned. Those other 3 markets all have their own nuances, their own catalysts for growth. Indianapolis is probably the largest of those 4 markets in terms of the amount of warehouse space, the amount of warehouse space that's up, the amount of warehouse space under construction. Again, a variety of reasons why, but one reason is they have a really large FedEx hub. If anybody's driven by the Indianapolis airport, FedEx has a huge presence. That's obviously a great boon to their market. Cincinnati is the air hub for Amazon nationally, maybe internationally, I'm not sure, but that hasn't even really started cranking up yet. They're still kind of building that facility, but that's been a boon for that market. And Louisville is the UPS world hub, again, from an air freight standpoint. So Columbus does benefit from all those, even though none of those catalysts are in Central Ohio. A lot of the industrial logistics business eventually gets its way to one of those air hubs and gets to the consumer. So let's talk about Columbus for a little bit. The vacancy rate in Columbus is less than 2%. That is the lowest vacancy rate, I think, ever. I think maybe it was 1.2% earlier this year, but it's I think 1.8% today. And to give you a sense, I mean, what's considered a healthy market would be probably 12 to 15% vacancy. So it's actually not good that we don't have any available warehouse space. Companies that want to expand into Columbus can't. They literally can't find space, so they're going to go to one of those other markets I mentioned. Again, as a case in point, I mean, everybody drives around, if you drive around the outer belt like I do, or the interstates, you see these warehouses going up everywhere, and you're thinking, you know, maybe not people in this room, but other people are saying, man, how many more warehouses do we need? You know, we were just building all these warehouses. Well, if you need 400,000 square feet of warehouse space today in Central Ohio, and you need it now, can't wait for construction to finish, you need it now, and you want to be in a modern bulk warehouse, not something that's 50 years old, you have one choice. In all of Central Ohio, one choice of nice Class A industrial space. That adds 2 more options. So again, for new modern bulk warehouse space that's available today, there's 5 options over 100,000 square feet in Central Ohio. Now, the good news is that's going to get rectified here. Right now, there are 16 buildings under construction in Central Ohio over 400,000 square feet. So that is changing. You know, I think frankly, our region is going to need to do a good job communicating that to all those companies that couldn't find space in Central Ohio and went elsewhere. We need to be reaching out to those companies, the economic development officials, the real estate brokers, the landlords, and waving our hand and say, hey, we have space available. Please come back. I will say, while you will have more choices in 3, 6, 9 months, lease rates will not be going down. The costs, again, interest rate, we all know interest rates are going up. Construction costs, I mean, it's just crazy. Again, we just priced a building last week. That's gone up 15 to 20% from the same time we priced it a year ago. So that building gets delivered a year from now, that lease rate will be 15 to 20% higher than lease rates today. So it's an interesting time to be in our market. I do have a slide that we can show that just kind of shows some of the highlights of the hot spots of Central Ohio. I plagiarized this from CBRE, so I gave them some recognition there in the corner. So again, far and away the biggest submarket is Rickenbacker with 78 million square feet. And again, when we talk, this is modern bulk warehouse buildings. We're not talking about manufacturing facilities. Canal Winchester is fairly new add, again, benefiting of some of the land constraints that we have in Rickenbacker. Grove City has been a strong market for a long, long time, but there's really no land available in Grove City to do industrial anymore. So that's led to growth in areas like West Jefferson and Etna. Again, if you've been on I-70 or flown over Central Ohio, you've probably noticed those. And then you have kind of the traditional industrial areas like East Columbus and West Bell that have been the historical center for 50 years. We've marked a couple of locations where we have buildings underway in the green. We're active in Rickenbacker. We've got a building going in close to Grove City. It's actually a Bolton Field, which we think is kind of a sleeper market, which has a great labor story. We found one site in Dublin that will allow us to do industrial, so we have a building in Dublin underway. And then we've done a lot in New Albany. We've probably done 8 buildings in New Albany in the past 3 years. Obviously, that's all before Intel was announced. And we've leased them to all kinds of different companies. I mean, yes, a lot of those companies have been L Brands suppliers, Bath and Body Works suppliers, but not all of them. And they're locating there for a variety of reasons. And so we were not surprised, but pleasantly surprised, I should say, at when Intel announced their plans. I mean, New Albany has just done a great job between the New Albany company and the city of New Albany welcoming warehouse development. Again, it wasn't always that way, but New Albany has welcomed warehouse development. They've seen the benefits from a tax standpoint that those buildings are generating right now, and they did it. I mean, there's people in this room, I think, that also played a role in that, but just a tremendous win for Central Ohio. So we've been selected as the developer for a supplier park for Intel. So it's about 500 acres. We have dialogue going right now with probably 20 different Intel suppliers of all different sizes, doing all different kinds of activities in the building or that they do for Intel. A few weeks ago, Intel had a supplier day where we kind of explained the supplier park that we have underway. We created this video to give an orientation for a lot of these companies that have never been to Ohio, who had no idea what was going on in Columbus. And so we put together this video to kind of give them an idea, a vision, our vision of what that supplier park will look like. And for some of you maybe that don't know exactly where Intel's going, maybe this video will be beneficial to you. So go ahead and view the video. So there you go. So that's what we have in mind around Intel. Again, I should say it's, our park is not restricted to Intel suppliers. We'll lease to anybody that's interested in leasing space. And we actually do have several companies that are interested in leasing space to try to hope to become an Intel supplier. So it's pretty exciting what's going on out there. I think it's going to be great for Columbus. I know that it's not just Intel suppliers, but Intel is really trying to encourage their suppliers to locate their suppliers in Central Ohio. So it's an exciting time for sure, and thank you for having me, and have a great day, everybody.
Thank you, Andy, and thank you to all of our guests today. Another round of applause for all of our speakers. And of course, thank you to you all for coming and joining us this morning, waking up early to come to this beautiful campus at Columbus State. But just a lot of excitement around our region, a lot of announcements that are in the works that are soon to come. I think if you took the odds that we say Intel over 20 times, I think you won. But honestly, the excitement around why they chose here, it's for a particular reason. And I hope that the panel today and the speakers today explained a lot of the reasons why the Columbus region is important, why a company would choose to be in Columbus, why it's important that we continue to grow in this space. And I hope that the Columbus Region Logistics Council continues to be a part of that excitement and a part of that growth. With that, I will bring up Cordell Walton from Cedric for our closing remarks. Thanks again.
Thank you, Zaki. And again, thank you everyone for joining us this morning. I want to give another round of applause for our speakers and panelists this morning. So again, my name is Cordell Walton with Sedgwick, and we are a risk solutions provider for employers across the state of Ohio. We help employers understand the risk and mitigate losses so they can achieve the lowest cost possible. When an injury does occur, we have the experience and expertise to handle even the most complex claims in a straightforward and efficient manner. We talked about a lot of topics today, from sustainability to workforce development to digital risk management. And when it comes to risk management, the ultimate goal is to understand your risk, mitigate losses, and achieve the lowest cost possible. For members of the Columbus Chamber, which Sedgwick is a proud and long-term member of the Columbus Chamber, we actually offer a benefit that members can actually save up to 50% on their BWC premium. So as we kind of shift our thoughts to think about what some of us need to be doing to add more resources towards improving our triple bottom line, to improving digital risk management, or putting together, grouping resources together to improve our bottom line, one of the ways to do that is to take advantage of the Workers' Compensation Savings Program through the Columbus Chamber. And right now is a great time to do that. We are actually enrolling, or at least evaluating, members for our upcoming enrollment, which is November 15th of this year. So if you're not a member of the Columbus Chamber or not aware of the Workers' Compensation Program with the Chamber, and you would like to know or like more information on it, or at least like to be evaluated, please either see me or talk to anyone at the Chamber staff. They'd be more than happy to help. So again, thank you guys for your time, and enjoy the rest of the morning.
I promised to be the very last speaker. Welcome everyone again. I'm Don DePiro, your President and CEO of your Columbus Chamber of Commerce. I'd like to thank Zaki Bashir from our team, who leads our Columbus Region Logistics Council, Jeremy Banta from Columbus State Community College, who teaches and is immersed in the supply chain, logistics and distribution universe here in Central Ohio, and all of the members of our Columbus Region Logistics Council. About 7 to 8% of our total membership of the Chamber, now going on 2,300 members, is part of our Columbus Region Logistics Council. So that shows you how important an organization it is to us. Again, you've heard it before, thank you to all of our presenters. They were great. Thank you for supporting our Columbus Region Logistics Council. Our presenting partners, Schneider Downs, Ease Logistics, and the Franklin County Board of Commissioners for their support for this long-running event. Thank you to our leader partners, Reveal and Wright-Patterson Wright-Pat Credit Union, and our venue partner, Columbus State Community College, in this beautiful room. Thank you so much. We've got a number of upcoming great events, including our clam bake at the end of the month. We're about to break 1,000 guests, 1,000 of our closest friends for our clam bake. If you've never been to that, it's at the zoo. It's a fantastic event. You really should come. And just visit columbus.org/events to learn more about all the great offerings at your Columbus Chamber of Commerce. Hey, have a great day. We brought you a Columbus Chamber of Commerce stay out there. Enjoy the sunshine and the cooler weather. Thank you all for being here. Have a great day. Thank you.